I told myself it was a good idea. A week in the mountains, just family, no distractions, no excuses. It was my suggestion, actually. I thought if I extended the olive branch, maybe Natalie would finally stop treating me like a threat. Maybe she'd just relax. But the moment we pulled up to the cabin, I felt it. That quiet tension clinging to the air, the kind no one talks about because it's just how she is. Natalie's smile was tight, her hug even tighter, like she was squeezing out resentment one rib at a time. I've lost count of the times she's made me the punchline. "Oh, Veronica and her perfect life," she once said, loud enough for the whole dinner table to hear. I laughed it off then, but it never really left me. She's always painted herself as the underdog, and I'm somehow the villain in her story just for existing. But I came with an open heart. I really did. I packed games, wine, even that silly s'mores kit she used to love. I wanted this to be a reset. For me, for us, for the whole damn family. I guess I underestimated just how much Natalie could carry in her suitcase. Jealousy, old grudges, a sharp tongue. She didn't leave any of it behind, and I could feel it, with every awkward glance and overly sweet comment, that peace wasn't what she packed for. The first night, we sat around the fireplace, pretending everything was fine. My parents chatted about hiking trails. Natalie played with her wine glass like it was an old secret, and Daniel, my husband, tried too hard to look relaxed. I watched her watching him, the way she laughed at his jokes, even the dumb ones he only told me. The way she touched his arm when she got up, casual, but not quite. I noticed it, every single time. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that I was being dramatic, or maybe even paranoid. But I wasn't. I know the difference between warmth and something that burns. Natalie's eyes lingered too long. Her compliments felt like sugar with a twist of lemon. And Daniel? He didn't say much, but I saw how his shoulders stiffened when she got too close. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. That was enough to keep my mind spinning. Still, I didn't say a word. I smiled. I poured drinks. I laughed when I had to. Because when you're a woman like me, the strong one, the put-together one, you learn early on that peace is often just performance. And God, was I performing. Every muscle in my face ached from holding the act. But deep down, something had started to shift. I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just trying to keep the peace anymore. I was beginning to measure the cost of keeping it. The days that followed were a blur of fake smiles and silent observations. I noticed how Natalie always managed to sit next to Daniel, how she'd chime in before I could finish a thought, how she made little digs masked as jokes like, "Wow, Daniel, you've got patience. I'd go crazy if I had to color code my pantry too." Everyone laughed. I didn't, because I knew what that laugh really meant. It wasn't about pantries, it was about power. But I played along. I helped cook breakfast. I went on hikes. I let her have her moments. Because I wanted to believe this trip still had a shot at healing something. And maybe a part of me hoped that if I just gave enough grace, she'd finally soften. That she'd stop seeing me as competition. But envy doesn't care about kindness. It feeds on it. And every quiet moment I gave her, she filled with bitterness. By the fourth night, something inside me had shifted. Not anger, not yet. But something quieter, sharper, like a thread snapping in the dark. I wasn't sure what it meant at the time. I just knew this trip wasn't going to end the way I thought it would. I came looking for peace. But Natalie came looking for something else entirely. It was supposed to be a quiet night. I'd left the others by the fire, saying I had a headache. Honestly, I just needed space, a moment to breathe without eyes on me, without pretending. The cabin was dim and still, except for the soft creak of old wood beneath my feet. I was almost to our bedroom when I heard it. Voices, low and too close. The kitchen door was slightly open. I froze. Natalie's voice came through, sharp as broken glass. "I don't know why you married her," she said, slow and certain. "You could have had me. You still could." And then, silence. Not protest, not outrage. Just a silence so thick, it pushed the air from my lungs. I stood there, one hand on the wall to steady myself. My heart pounded like it wanted to run ahead of me, to flee before the rest of me caught up with what I'd just heard. I didn't move, I didn't confront, I didn't cry. Instead, I backed away, quietly, like I was leaving a crime scene, which, in a way, I was. A betrayal had just happened. Maybe not with touch, but with intent, with opportunity. And Daniel's silence. That was the loudest part. It echoed down the hall with me, wrapped itself around my ribs. I didn't need to hear more. What I heard was already enough. Back in the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, hands trembling just enough to spill a thought I wasn't ready to name. I stared at the window, the moonlight cutting through the curtains like a silent witness. I kept replaying the moment. Her voice, his silence, the way she said it, like it wasn't the first time she'd thought it. Like maybe it wasn't the first time she'd said it either. I didn't ask questions. I didn't storm out. That's not me. I'm not the one who flips tables. I'm the one who listens, who waits, who watches. And that night, something inside me turned cold, not out of weakness, but out of clarity. For the first time in a long time, I saw both of them clearly. Natalie, always chasing what I had. Daniel, quietly letting her orbit closer. And me? I was done playing peacemaker in a war they were already waging. Instead of spiraling, I began to sort. Memories, conversations, glances I had once dismissed. All of it started to rearrange itself, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized was incomplete. My mind was quiet, but sharp, like a knife pulled from the drawer. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. I wasn't going to let it slide, and I wasn't going to warn them either. I barely slept that night. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak in the floorboards, every door that opened and closed. I imagined their faces, how they looked when I wasn't around. Did they laugh together? Did they talk about me like I was some obstacle, some inconvenience they had to pretend to care about? The questions came like waves, but I didn't drown in them. I floated, cold, still, watching the storm instead of swimming in it. By morning I was changed, not broken. No, not that. Just still, like someone who'd been handed the final piece of a puzzle she didn't ask to build. I moved through breakfast like nothing had happened. I poured coffee. I passed the butter. Natalie chirped her usual false cheer, and Daniel acted like he hadn't just betrayed the woman who chose him. I watched them both like strangers, because that's what they had become. And as I folded napkins and asked about hiking trails, a new thought settled in. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg. I wasn't even going to give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd gotten under my skin. No, if they wanted to play quiet games in the dark, they'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd respond, not in whispers, but in a voice they couldn't ignore. The morning felt like theater, everyone playing their part, smiling on cue, pretending nothing was fraying at the seams. I slipped into the role easily, too easily, maybe. I asked Natalie how she slept. I kissed Daniel on the cheek. I even offered to make pancakes. And as I moved through the motions, I watched them both closely, the way you study a chessboard before you strike. Every word, every glance, every pause. I logged it all. Natalie was radiant in her performance. She laughed a little too loud, brushed imaginary lint off Daniel's sleeve, and kept slipping into his space like she belonged there. Daniel, to his credit, barely looked at me. But it wasn't guilt. No, it was something else. Like he'd already started rewriting the story in his head. A story where I'd become the distant wife, the cold one. The kind of story that justifies betrayal. He didn't know I'd already read the last page. I spent the day observing, not reacting. The way Daniel handed her a jacket when it got cold, without a second thought. The way she called him D like it was some inside joke. And the worst part? How familiar it all felt. Like this had been going on longer than I'd realized. But I didn't flinch. I didn't break. I just tucked it all away. Every detail. Like ammunition. Because I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was looking for timing. That evening, while they were outside by the fire pit, I stayed back under the excuse of needing a shower. My hands shook slightly as I picked up Daniel's phone from the charger, not from fear, but anticipation. I wasn't expecting fireworks. I was expecting silence. And that's exactly what I found. No messages, no calls, not a single trace of her. They were smarter than that, or maybe just cowardly enough to leave no written proof. Still, the absence spoke volumes. It confirmed what I already knew, that this wasn't some silly flirtation. This was practiced, protected, and that meant they were both fully aware of the line they'd crossed. I set the phone down gently, like it might bite, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. My eyes didn't look sad, not even angry, just focused. That was the part of me they had underestimated. I didn't need texts or photos or receipts. I wasn't a lawyer building a case. I was a woman reclaiming her narrative. They had chosen shadows. I'd choose light. I'd choose the truth, not the kind that begged for sympathy, but the kind that strips away the mask. I wasn't waiting for a confession. I was preparing a reveal. And when it came, it would be sharp, precise, and impossible to ignore. Dinner that night was quiet, but not in the peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that buzzed under the skin. Too polite, too measured. Natalie complimented my cooking with that syrupy smile, and Daniel nodded along like he couldn't feel the air tightening around us. I smiled too, said thank you, passed the salt. But inside, I was miles away, rehearsing lines, reading faces, waiting for the perfect breath in the conversation to shatter everything they thought I didn't know. They were so sure I was still in the dark. So confident in their lies by omission. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't wounded. I was done giving them the benefit of the doubt. They had written me out of their private script, but what they forgot, what they never saw coming, is that I was still holding the stage lights, and I was about to flip them on, full blast. There's something beautifully cruel about letting people believe they've gotten away with something. Letting them bask in the comfort of your silence, unaware that you're not just watching, you're documenting. They whispered in corners, I planned in daylight, and by the time they realized what was coming, I'd already prepared the final scene. The last night had that forced sense of celebration, like we were all pretending to be the kind of family people post about online. The fire was lit, the table was full, and there was too much wine for anyone to think clearly. Everyone talked louder than necessary, clinking glasses and laughing too easily. Natalie wore red, of course she did, the kind of dress you don't pack for a cabin trip unless you're trying to be noticed. Daniel couldn't stop glancing at her. I noticed. I always noticed. I waited. I let the evening stretch out just enough to get comfortable. I asked my dad about the trip back, teased my mom about overpacking. Natalie made some joke about me finally loosening up, and Daniel smirked into his glass like he was in on something. I smiled too, warm, gracious, exactly the way they expected me to. And then I stood up, holding my wine like I was about to make a toast. Which, in a way, I was. I just want to say thank you, I began, my voice steady, soft. This trip meant a lot. Some of us came here to make memories. Some came to rewrite old ones. I let my eyes move across the table, pausing only slightly on Natalie, then Daniel. And some of us, I added, offered themselves to another woman's husband. The room didn't react immediately. It was like they needed a second to realize I wasn't telling a story. I was ending one. Natalie's smile dropped like a curtain. For a second, she just stared at me, frozen, wine glass in hand, as if she wasn't sure what play we were in anymore. Daniel's fork slipped from his hand and clattered against the plate, the sound sharp enough to slice through every ounce of pretense. My parents sat stunned, mouths slightly open, caught between confusion and the creeping horror of understanding. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just let it land. No one spoke. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need a scream, or a sob, or a dramatic denial. I just needed that silence. That heavy, breathless silence where everyone saw them as they were. Not just siblings at odds, not just a husband and wife, but two people who had betrayed, lied, and smiled through it. And me? I had simply turned on the lights. Then I reached into my bag and set a small recorder on the table. I pressed play. Just long enough. Just enough to hear Natalie's voice echo through the room. You could have had me. You still could. The words floated there, damning and unshakable. I watched my mother's eyes widen. My father's jaw clenched. Natalie's hand went limp. Daniel couldn't even look up. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. The recording ended, and the only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the dining room clock, like it was keeping time for a moment no one would forget. Natalie's lips parted like she might defend herself, but no words came. And Daniel? He just sat there blinking, as if maybe he could blink his way into a different reality. One where I hadn't heard it. one where I hadn't pressed play, one where I'd stayed silent like they were counting on. I didn't look at either of them. Instead, I turned to my mother and smiled. A real smile this time. Not forced, not polite, just free. "Thank you all," I said, calmly collecting my plate. "I think this will be a trip we'll all remember for a long time." I stood, slid the chair back, and walked away without drama. No shouting, no breakdown, just the truth, ringing louder than anything I could have said. Behind me, I could feel the fallout beginning. My father muttering something under his breath, my mother asking questions in a panicked whisper, Natalie scrambling to breathe, to recover. Daniel still frozen, drowning in the silence he had once used to protect himself. I didn't turn back. I had done what I came to do, and the silence they had used to betray me, I had turned it into their sentence. I left before sunrise. No goodbyes, no final stares. Just the sound of gravel crunching beneath my tires and a long, winding road ahead. The cabin disappeared in the rearview mirror, and with it, everything that had once kept me tethered. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I had done enough of both in the quiet hours leading up to this. Now, there was only forward. By noon, I'd already filed for separation. Quick, clean, no drama. Daniel didn't deserve a warning. Natalie didn't deserve a conversation. I blocked them both. Phone, email, socials. Gone. My parents called 3 times. I let it ring. Then I finally picked up and said, "You can keep the family. I'll keep my peace." And that was the end of that. No explanation. No apologies. I was finished explaining myself to people who only heard what they wanted to. It's strange how quickly silence can become sanctuary. The same silence that once held betrayal now wrapped around me like protection. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. Like I had stepped out of a fog I didn't know I'd been living in. And in that clarity, something unexpected sparked. Not revenge, not bitterness, but the urge to speak, not to them, to others, to women like me who had smiled through the ache for far too long. I didn't name names. I didn't post pictures. I just wrote. One night, with a cup of tea and a blanket wrapped around me like armor, I typed it all out. The getaway, the recording, the moment I stood up at that table and let the truth breathe on its own. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't embellish. I wrote it as it was, calm, clear, devastating. I hit publish anonymously. And then I closed my laptop, convinced no one would ever read it. But they did. Hundreds, then thousands. Women mostly, some younger, some older, all carrying their own versions of betrayal. They flooded the comments with stories I'd never heard but somehow understood. "Thank you for writing this," they said. "You put into words what I couldn't." Some said they cried. Others said they left. One woman said she finally confronted her sister after years of denial. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't expected to be seen. And in that strange digital chorus, something shifted inside me again. I realized I hadn't just escaped something toxic. I had turned it into something useful. I had peeled back the curtain not just for myself, but for others still sitting in the dark, waiting for someone else to say, "This isn't okay." I didn't just walk away from Daniel and Natalie. I walked toward something real, something louder than silence. I don't believe everything happens for a reason. Some things happen because people are selfish, because they lie, because they think no one's watching. But I do believe in choice, and I chose to stop shrinking. I chose to stop performing peace while bleeding inside. I chose myself, fully, unapologetically, and that's not something Daniel or Natalie ever saw coming. They expected rage or silence. Instead, they got a story, and the world listened. Occasionally, someone will send me a message, a stranger, a sister, a wife, saying, "I saw myself in your words." And I think that's the point. We live so much of our pain alone, quietly convincing ourselves it's not big enough to matter. But it does. And when one woman breaks that silence, it gives others permission to do the same. I didn't set out to be brave. I just refused to keep swallowing my voice. They tried to break me quietly, behind closed doors, with glances and secrets and smirks they thought I'd never notice. But I didn't shatter. I rebuilt. Not in the way they would recognize, in the way that made me untouchable. Because I didn't just survive what they did. I turned it into something louder, stronger, and mine.